As the skies over Syria get yet more crowded, we may be witnessing another turning point in a conflict now in its 6th year. Turkish planes bombing both ISIS and Kurds on Monday inside of Syria. ISIS after the weekend suicide attack on a wedding party in Gaziantep that's claimed at least 54 lives. Kurds, whose Turkish PKK wing is at war with Ankara and whose Syrian PYG fighters are no longer giving Assad's army a wide berth. The prospect of a unified, autonomous Kurdish region at Turkey's border enough to have President Erdogan bearing the hatchet with Assad's backers in Tehran and Moscow. Detente with Damascus would certainly be a turning point if it happened. Oh, and by the way, guess who is in town Wednesday? U.S. Vice President Joe Biden traveling to Ankara. His administration backs the Kurds because, well, they're the only ones on the ground fighting ISIS. What tack to take with hosts that are NATO partners but who are at odds over ISIS, over Kurds, over the recent coup plot against President Erdogan? Today, in the France 24 debate, what about the Kurds? And with us from Kobani, Syria, Idris Nassan. He's a former spokesperson for the Kurdish-led local government there. Thank you for joining us in the France 24 debate.
Hello, and thank you for having me.
We're also pleased to welcome back former UN General Dominique Trinquant. Nice to see you. France 24 Chief International Affairs Editor Robert Parsons joins us as well. The France 24 debate on Facebook and Twitter are hashtag F24debate. Monday was air raids. This Tuesday, Turkey's artillery shelling Islamic State targets across the border in Syria. Yes, it's a three-way fight with for the Turks with ISIS and the Kurds. And this comes after mortar rounds attributed to ISIS landed on Turkish territory. For more, we can cross to correspondent Tom Stevenson, who is in Istanbul for an update. Tom, Turkey ordering the evacuation of a border town with Syria.
Well, yes. We should clarify, actually, that the mayor of the local town has denied that an order has been given to local people. But what we do know is that whether an order has been given or not, and there is some dispute about that, others say the police have ordered people to leave. Civilians are, in any case, doing it of their own accord. According to the information we have, the Turkish government is, of course, loath to give out precise information about its military movements. There are up to 1,500 fighters, Syrian fighters, who are currently stationed in that town, waiting, ready for a Turkish-backed assault on the city of Jarabulus, which is currently held by Islamic State. We've seen a buildup of armor on the border, up to and including tanks. One of the big questions which is on everybody's mind here is who exactly are these fighters? We've been told that they're Syrian rebels, but do they include fighters from Ahrar al-Sham? Do they include fighters from Nuruddin Azinki? Do they include fighters from Jabhat Fatah al-Sham, for example? These are Takfiri jihadist groups. That's something which hasn't been clarified. What we know for sure is that something very serious is in the offing. Turkey and the Turkish government, I should say, has said explicitly they're going to provide whatever support that they can for this offensive. Everyone's basically waiting with bated breath to see how it's going to play out.
Tom, it can be confusing for people who don't watch the region very closely. Are the 2 points hermetically sealed in the eyes of Turks, taking on ISIS on the one hand, and the fighting that's going on, or the bombing raids that happened on Monday against Kurds?
Well, that's a very good question, and one which draws out some of the contradictions of the moment. The fact is the Turkish government currently says it is very serious about taking on Islamic State, but simultaneously says that it sees the Kurdish movement, political movement as a whole, and especially the PKK, which is de facto at the head of the Kurdish movement in northern Syria and southeastern Turkey, as an equal threat to the Islamic State. Now, that's a position which has internal contradictions, or at least appears to be incoherent. Critics say, including prominent critics inside Turkey and outside, that Turkey's playing a double game here. That, in fact, what its real long-term goal is to ensure there's no autonomous Syrian state or stateless on its borders, which might give ideas to Kurds within Turkey, and that if that means getting rid of ISIS for now, they'll do that, but the main goal is really to make sure that Jarabulus isn't taken by Kurdish forces. Exactly how that's going to play out will have to remain to be seen. The Kurdish Syrian fighters may not want Jarabulus to be taken by other Takfiri jihadists if that is indeed who Turkey is backing. Perhaps Turkey is doing exactly as it says it's doing. The government says, no, we're serious about taking on ISIS. They've proved themselves to be a threat many times within Turkey's borders, and that's what we're doing. Exactly how it plays out on the ground is going to be really what the proof will be in the pudding, as it were.
All right, many thanks for that. Tom Stevenson with an update from Istanbul. And we can stay in Istanbul and say hello now to Galip Dalai, Research Director at the Al-Sharq Forum think tank, a public policy think tank. Many thanks for being with us again here in the France 24 debate. A lot to reflect on in what was just said there by our correspondent. And let me first of all, ask you, this equation, putting on equal footing ISIS and the PKK. What do you think of that? Is that something that's really being done by the Turks?
Well, I mean, let me put it that way. Turkey puts them within the framework of terrorism, and the PKK is on the terrorist list of Turkey, on the terrorist list of the European Union, and on the terrorist list of the US. And the PKK and the Turkey and the PKK fight has caused more than over 40,000 deaths. And in the last year, we have also experienced what is called like the trenches within the cities, in which PKK tried to replicate some of the tactics that it has learned from the Syria and apply them in Turkey, by which it is trying to occupy some cities. It was trying to occupy some provinces and create de facto self-administered areas. Within this framework, Turkey does not draw much distinction in terms of as a terrorist group between the PKK and Daesh or the ISIS. But nevertheless, the two groups adopt two different ideology and adopt two different tactics. But eventually what Turkey says, one of them is its traditional threat perception. Its fight with Turkey, with PKK has gone more than over 3 decades. It has a historical background. It is, it has a traditional threat perception vis-a-vis the PKK and its irredentist claims towards Turkey. And the Daesh is relatively a newcomer, but a brutal one. It's an extremist one, and it poses grave dangers to Turkey.
And Galip, let me ask you that the other point made there. We've got this buildup of Syrian rebels to try to retake that town of Jarabulus. And we heard our correspondent there say it's an open question who they are and whether they include radical groups. Do you have any information on who are these Syrian rebels?
Well, we don't know the formation of the Syrian rebels, but one thing that I think Turkey will be basically selecting them from. It will be from the Free Syrian Army branches, which is also supported by the U.S. and also larger by the West in general as well too. So I don't think that Turkey will include elements of groups like Jabhat al-Nusra, etc.
All right, let me get Idris Nassan's take from Kobani. You agree with Galip Dalai?
Actually, I don't agree with him in many points. First of all, we cannot compare PKK with Daesh. They have different ideologies. They have different methods of struggling or fighting. Let's say for PKK, they struggle for the Kurds' rights in Turkey. They fought against the Turkish authorities or governments for many years now. But I think, on the other hand, they ceased the fire and asked for negotiations many times. And in Turkey, they had long term of ceasing fire, and they had negotiations that collapsed in 2015. But for ISIS, of course, they are just making terrorist attacks on civilians. They behead people. They do all actions that just to make people feel fear from him and to submit to their goals. For this, I think to put that both sides, let's say both groups on the same list, it is something unfair. Now, what Turkish authorities are doing in Syria, they don't care about the Syrian people. They don't care about what they are suffering from for now about 6 years. what they are caring about is just to stop Kurdish people to make their federalism in the northern side of Syria. For this, at this time exactly, they are pushing some extreme groups, some groups who call them that they are FSA or Syrian Free Army, but the reality is very different. They are from Nuruddin Zanki, from Asifat al-Shamal, from different groups who committed actually actions against humanity. We all remember the 10 or 12 years old boy who was slaughtered in Aleppo in a very bad way, like Daesh, like ISIS. So how we can support these people to control a town in Syria? We care about the Syrian people. This is just because of some political goals that Turkey don't want just the Syrian Democratic Forces to control these areas and to defeat ISIS there. They just do everything just to stop Kurds not to support the Syrian people.
All right, diametrically opposed views then on the motives and the intentions there of Ankara when it comes to northern Syria. And again, much of the concern in Ankara is over the gains made across the border by Kurdish militias. More from in this report by William Hildebrand.
On its southern border, Turkey is bolstering its defenses and wants to eliminate any chance that a Syrian Kurdistan could be created. On the same day Ankara shelled the Islamic State group near Jarabulus, it also attacked one of the most effective forces fighting against the jihadists, striking some 20 targets of the Syrian Kurdish group YPG in Manbij. If Turkey's tactics in Syria seem like a conflict of interest, they may be explained by looking at its domestic challenges. It's had to deal with a 3-decade-long insurgency by the Kurdistan's Workers' Party, or PKK. Ankara says a YPG has ties to the group and has warned it from making advances towards its border.
Syria's territorial integrity must be protected. It must not be controlled by any ethnic group.
The battle for Syria's north is key. On the ground, the YPG are among the most effective forces fighting IS. For that reason, the US, EU, and UN have all urged Turkey to show restraint. Since 2013, the Islamic State has been in control of Jarabulus, the city offering a valuable supply route for arms and fighters in and out of Syria. But after the YPG captured Manbij last month, the force is advancing on Jarabulus. If it frees a city, its territory indicated here in yellow would extend to be one contiguous Kurdish zone in the north. It may be a far cry from a Kurdistan state, but YPG's advance has Ankara worried.
Robert Parsons, are we at a turning point when it comes to the conflict in Syria right now?
Well, I mean, the easy answer to that is who knows? We've been at similar so-called turning points in the past in Syria, and they've turned out not to be. But certainly something does seem to be in the offing at the moment, and part of it, of course, is because of the maneuvers that Turkey is involved in, appearing to shift its position, in particular over President Assad in Syria. Should he be allowed to take part in the negotiations for a future peace or not? A few months ago, the answer from Ankara was categorical on that. There's no way that President Assad could take part. Now they're saying something different. Now they're saying, yes, it's absolutely normal for President Assad to take part in the peace negotiations and any interim agreement.
Even a hint that he could stay on for a little while afterwards.
Well, as part of an interim agreement. I think the Turks have also made it clear that they don't see him as being part of the long-term arrangement. The problem really, though, is what deal is there to be struck between the Turks on the one hand and the Russians and the Iranians and President Assad on the other. It's difficult at this stage to see how they can come to a real agreement about the future of Syria.
After the shooting down late last year of that Russian fighter jet, we've seen the recent warming in relations between Ankara and
two things
and Moscow. But do they make strange bedfellows?
Well, they do make strange bedfellows, but we're seeing two things happening at the same time. We're seeing the warming of the relationship with Moscow, but seeing a considerable, very serious deterioration in the relationship between Ankara and Washington. And that's also beginning to play out now in Syria.
General Trinquant?
Yes, we are looking on the ground at the battle of the border, which is have different meaning. For Turkey, the battle of the border, important aim is not to have a Kurdish state in south of the border. For all the other party, and we've got 5 different parties involved in this battle. The important is the negotiation in Geneva. They want to be in a good position prior to the negotiation in Geneva. And that's why we've got at the same time the involvement of the Turkish army, which is bombing the city of Jarabulus, because if Jarabulus is taken after Manbij by the democratic forces of Syria, then there will be the possibility of a link between at the south of the border
A
of
unified
Turkey.
strip that stretches all the way from Syria to Iraq.
Exactly. And what is very interesting is that when we are talking about Jarabulus and the importance of that and saying that it is the city where there were things for the ISIS coming in and out from where? From Turkey.
Yeah.
So it's very important that there is a change now because Turkey, after the attacks in Turkey, is probably realizing that the Kurdish are not the only enemy, and ISIS, because they have been too weak with ISIS for years now they've got to battle against 2 enemies: the traditional Kurdish enemy in Turkey, but also the new one, which is ISIS, and which was indirectly, not directly, but indirectly supported by Turkey.
I mean, it's instructive in that respect. I don't think I'm wrong on this, that Turkey never fired its artillery at Manbij whilst the Islamic State was in control of Manbij. But now that it's fallen to the SDF, the joint Arab and Kurdish force, it's started to shell Manbij, which does rather suggest something about its priorities.
Does that weekend bombing, that horrific bombing at a wedding party in the southeastern Turkish city of Gaziantep, does that change the equation?
Yes, probably. It's interesting because the ISIS never say that they make an attack in Turkey, never. But probably the intelligence in Turkey know.
They never claim responsibility.
Yeah, exactly. But now probably
except for the attack in Suruc, I think, which they claim attack.
And so I think this is a major change. But I see the major change is the possibility for the border south of Turkey to be Kurd, and that's impossible for the Turkish government.
All right, we're going to ask our guests in Istanbul, in Kobani, about it when we come back. You're watching the France 24 debate.